I encountered 3 terrifying jogging horrors that will haunt your every run. I never should have opened that door. The simple act of stepping outside sent chills racing down my spine, a tingle of fear I couldn't shake off. My evening jog was always a routine way to clear my head, but tonight felt different. The air was thick, heavy with something ominous. Shadows danced menacingly on the pavement, shifting in the corner of my eye. My heart hammered in my chest as I took my first steps down the dimly lit street. As I ran, the familiar sounds of a quiet neighborhood faded into eerie silence. The usual chirping of crickets had vanished, replaced by a whisper. I strained to hear, but all I caught was the slightest rustle, like dry leaves whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Each breath I took felt colder, and the chill wrapping around me made my skin prickle. What had started as a soothing escape morphed into a dark descent. Then, I saw it. A figure. Just a glimpse too quick to be sure. A flicker of movement to my right. My pulse quickened. I ran harder, but the feeling of being watched settled deep in my gut. My feet pounded the pavement, quickening with every sound that crept from the shadows. Was that a growl? This time, I stopped. Held my breath. I listened. Nothing but the throbbing of my heart in my ears. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting distorted shadows that seemed to taunt me. I could feel a presence lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I turned to head home, but the atmosphere thickened, a heaviness that made it difficult to breathe. Odd sounds echoed thud like a heartbeat matching mine. I was drenched in sweat now, the cold seeping deeper. Then, there it was again, a shuffle, a breath behind me. Panic surged through me. I glanced back, and for a fleeting second, I caught sight of a dark silhouette, its shape unnaturally twisted, menacing. My blood ran cold. I sprinted, my feet pounding like a drum, but the figure was gaining on me. With every turn, dread clawed at my chest. I could almost feel its icy breath on my neck. Out of nowhere, a voice cried out, breaking the stillness. Run! It wasn't mine. It was a warning, a command. But I didn't need urging, I was already racing. The pavement blurred beneath me. My lungs ached, my legs felt leaden, yet I pushed on, driven by fear and the desperate need to survive, and just as I reached my doorstep, I heard the final sound, a door slamming shut behind me. I whipped around to face the darkness, but nothing was there, except that unbearable silence. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The next morning felt like a nightmare that bled into reality. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, dispelling some of the terror, but shadows still lurked at the edges of my vision, remnants of the darkness that had pursued me. Groggy but restless, I poured myself a cup of coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, yet I couldn't shake the aftermath of last night. I brushed off my lingering fear. Maybe it was just an overactive imagination. After all, every jogger had seen something strange when their heart raced and breath quickened, but as I sipped my coffee by the window, watching people begin their day outside, a chill ran down my spine. An old man walked by, dragging his feet, muttering something under his breath. I squinted, trying to catch what he said. Coming for you, they always come. He glanced at me, his eyes clouded and hollow, filled with a fear that froze me in place. I instinctively backed away from the window, my heart racing at yet another reminder of the terror from last night. That I decided to call it a day and stay indoors, but the memories of that nightmare haunted every corner of my mind. The shadows began to creep again, swirling in the corners of my house, whispering to each other in a language I couldn't understand. My phone buzzed, jolting me back to reality. A message from a friend. I've been having strange dreams. They feel real. Are you okay? I hesitated, words caught in my throat. Should I tell him what happened? Would he understand? before I could respond, another sound crept into my consciousness, a soft, persistent knock. I froze, ears straining towards the door. Who could it be? I lived alone, and this was no time for visitors. The knocking intensified, a frantic, desperate rhythm that resonated deep in my bones. With each knock, my dread mounted like a tide threatening to drown me. Who is it? I managed to call, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only that relentless knocking, now accompanied by a low, indistinct whisper that sent shivers crawling down my back. The words melded into a sound so unnerving it made my skin crawl. I backed away, pressing my back against the wall, feeling the cold paint against my skin. Then, without warning, the knocking stopped. I held my breath, balancing on the edge of panic. Maybe they went away? I peered through the peephole, praying for normalcy, but nothing could prepare me for what I saw. The figure from last night, twisted and grotesque, stood just outside my door. Its features were indistinguishable, too dark to comprehend, yet an air of palpable hunger surrounded it that I stumbled back, adrenaline flooding my veins. I needed to escape. The kitchen window. I dashed through the house, not daring to look away from the door. As I reached the kitchen, I froze. That same old man from earlier stood outside, staring directly at me, his gaze pleading. "You have to run," he shouted, urgent and terrified. "They will come for you next." Heart racing, I couldn't tell if I was losing my grip on reality, but when I finally turned to escape, my breath hitched. The door began to vibrate violently, as if something hell-bent on getting in was throwing itself against it. The whispers were louder now, a cacophony of voices rising in pitch, shrieking in desperation. And it was then I noticed the floor beneath me tremble, that I bolted towards the window, every muscle in my body screaming to get out, but something made me halt. The shadows were deepening around me, gathering like a storm. The walls rippled, and the air grew heavy with malevolence. Darkness swirled, and I felt the presence of something otherworldly, a surge of dread that pulled at the edges of my sanity. The knocking resumed, now accompanied by scratching, clawing, stemming from the door itself. "You can't escape," it hissed, the voice a blend of every nightmare I had ever imagined. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, and I glanced down to see my friend's message. "Did you hear that? They are coming for you." The last thing I might have been able to process was the last panicked thought that exploded in my mind. Who were they? But before I could form a coherent response, a shadow burst through the door, and the world around me shattered into splinters of fear. As the darkness surged forth, I felt my legs giving way, my vision blackening. Then, everything went still, and I was left hanging on the fragile edge of a new horror. I heard a final whisper right in my ear, chillingly close. "Welcome." It took moments to regain my senses, but clarity fought me like a beast in its last throes. I was back on the floor. As the stillness enveloped me, the weight of dread sank heavily in my chest. The world seemed to flicker like a dying light, colors bleeding together into a horrendous gray. My fingers brushed the wooden floor, the grain damp beneath my touch, and I felt as if 1,000 unseen eyes bore into me from the shadows. The only sound that shattered the intoxicating silence was the relentless whispering, an invisible choir of tormented souls clamoring for release. "You're one of us now," they echoed, lustrous menace glowing in their tone. I pressed my palms to my ears, trying to drown out the phantom cacophony, desperate to rattle myself back to sanity. But the whispers wove around and through me, pinning me in place. "You have to wake up," a voice broke through, clearer than the others, chillingly familiar. I looked up sharply to see the old man, now standing at the end of the hallway, bathed in shadows. His face was gaunt, a skeletal reminder of someone whose eyes had seen horrors I could scarcely imagine. "You can't let them take you," he warned, extending a trembling hand towards me. That I scrambled to my feet, instinctively moving towards him, but as I did, an icy draft swept past, forcing the air from my lungs. Dark figures coiled from the walls, undulating like smoke, their faces obscured but the hunger in their presence tangible enough to taste. I dared a glance back at the door, now warped and splintered, shadows clawing hungrily from the cracks they had created. In a fleeting moment of lucidity, I realized if I didn't act soon, I would drown in this darkness. "What do I do?" I gasped, the old man's presence feeling like a tether to reality. "You have to go back. Wake them before it's too late. He shouted, urgency gripping his voice like a vice. The shadows licked at the edges of my vision, inching closer. What do you mean? Are they alive? My heart pounded as I imagined the horror of being trapped in this nightmarish limbo where nothing was real anymore, and the shadows had teeth. They're connected to you. Each step you run draws them closer, he rasped. I could feel the air thickening, pressed upon by shadows eagerly squeezing out the light. You need the key to break free. He motioned frantically toward the kitchen, his body tense as the darkness quivered, clawing toward him as if aware of its prey. No. I shouted, but it was too late. The old man began to fade, the shadows curling around him like serpents. His mouth was open in a silent scream as I watched him dissolve into that swirling blackness, the horror filling the void left behind. Panic fluttered in my chest, threatening to drown me. Had he been a figment of my imagination? A guardian spirit trying to save myself from the collective despair of those cursed to roam this plane? The whispering grew louder, now nearly drowning out my thoughts. They were coming for me, tossing my own fears back into my face, echoing every insecurity. You will run, forever, they taunted, their words a sinister melody that wrapped around my thoughts like tendrils grasping to pull me into their depths. Something surged within me, a primal instinct to survive. I whipped towards the kitchen, realizing the only path left was the one I initially sought to escape. Dim light flickered toward me, illuminating the space as I rushed past the remnants of my flattened reality. I needed the key the old man spoke of, but where would I find it? As I entered the kitchen, I noticed the distinct absence of the window. Instead, a swirling wall of shadows stood in its place, a veil of despair taunting me, beckoning me closer with hushed whispers. I could feel their presence pressing against me, warm breath against my neck as I hesitated at the threshold of the darkness. Suddenly, the ground quaked, and a resonance vibrated through my bones. I staggered, bracing myself against the counter, trying to steady myself as a chaotic frenzy erupted before my eyes. The shadows swirled violently but formed distinctly. Recognizable shapes, faces of those I had lost, the maelstrom of my past materializing before me. Their eyes were pleading, accusing, sending a chill racing down my spine. Let us out. They screamed in unison, their tortured souls stretching toward me like fragile threads reaching for the light they could not touch. I lifted my hand instinctively, as if to help, when a voice rang clear amid the madness. It was my friend's voice, a lifeline that jolted my senses. Run. You have to break the cycle. It's the only way. But how could I, entangled in this throbbing shadow? A violent grasp from behind interrupted my thoughts. I turned just in time to see a figure materialize out of the darker recesses of the room, its limbs grotesquely elongated, eyes hollow and deep-set, the very embodiment of fear itself. The creature lunged for me, and instinct took over. I dashed toward the silhouettes pleading at the void, their hands reaching out like anchors in the swirling chaos, desperate to break the cycle that threatened to snare me forever. Stop. I screamed, tearing through the darkness, ordering them to release their grip on my mind. At that precise moment, the whispers intensified, drowning out my thoughts, and I stumbled through the cacophony, praying for the light until my arms found another figure amidst the shadows, warm and vibrant. But as I clung to it, I realized too late who it was, for a flash of recognition held me in place. That my friend, who had texted me moments ago, stood before me, his face twisted in horror as he stared across the room at the creature, realization dawning in his eyes. And then the shadows closed around us both, a swirling abyss that seemed to laugh, as I finally understood the terrible truth. I was never alone in this. That moment, paralytic fear gripped me, as I felt the cold touch against my back and heard a familiar voice whisper sweetly from behind, "Now you're one of us, too." The shadows pulsed like a living heartbeat, and with the terror of my friend reflected in his wide eyes, I felt the weight of despair crush down upon me, wrapping tighter than a vice. The creature unfurled its limbs, towering against the stillness, casting a grotesque, elongated silhouette. Its face was a warped distortion of everything I feared. The hollow eyes anchored my gaze, drawing me into the depths of an unspeakable void that promised eternal darkness. No. I cried, desperate to shake off the crushing wave of dread that threatened to pull us under. I turned to my friend, stammering the words I wanted to reassure him with, but found my own voice drowned in the collective wails of the lost souls echoing through the room. We need to move. We have toy can't. He shouted, his voice breaking, the static sharp with agony. It's too strong. As if the darkness sensed our fear, it surged closer, thickening like a viscous liquid. I turned my back to the monstrous entity and grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward the kitchen door. I was acutely aware that time was relentless, ticking like a clock counting the seconds until we too would belong to that agonizing choir of whispers. Every second mattered, every breath drew us closer to undoing. Follow me, I urged, desperately mapping our escape through the thrumming chaos. We inched toward the threshold, but the shadows clawed back, pulling my friend away from me, their icy talons weaving through the air like a web. It felt as if the walls themselves were conspiring to keep him tethered, the very foundation of reality shifting to keep us apart. Let him go, I screamed. With a surge of adrenaline, I felt something break within me, like a dam releasing a tidal wave, and I lunged forward, forcing the shadows apart. The moment felt electric, my heart ignited by a desperate will, but I never anticipated the reaction it would evoke. The creature let out an ear-splitting shriek, reverberating so strongly I felt it in my bones. The shadows recoiled, shifting shapes as if disarmed by my defiance. In that instant, clarity flashed before me. That grotesque entity was fueled by fear that stifled the light within us. Come on, I shouted again, lunging forward, pulling my friend from the abyss that threatened to swallow him whole. The light flickered around us, moments away from extinguishing. We crashed through the oppressive shadows, and for a fleeting moment I thought we might escape, but as my feet hit the threshold, the ground erupted beneath me, splintering like breaking glass. The kitchen floor buckled and twisted, pulling me down into the inky depths of despair, while my friend was yanked into an eerie silence that followed. I reached for him, my hands stretching across the chasm, our fingers almost touching. Time warped as screams fluttered away into a soft echo. No, I wailed, but it was futile. The abyss yawned wider, consuming everything in its path, pulling me down with it. I felt warmth seep away, a pale flicker of reality slipping from my grasp. Gasping, I landed on a cool metal surface that jolted me back to consciousness. The chaos vanished like a mirage, simply an imprinted night terror. Heart racing, I quickly sat up, wide-eyed, my surroundings bathed in an acrid light reminiscent of the horror just endured. I was alone, and yet, my senses screamed that I had not escaped as easily as I had hoped. In the eerie stillness, a faint hum penetrated the silence, a mournful melody threadbare with grief. It was then I noticed my reflection in a nearby metallic surface, a visage sewn together from flesh and dread. My eyes were wide and alien, yet I felt an unnatural calm wash over me. The whispers returned, this time less frantic but laced with a terrible knowing. You will join, they whispered, a grotesque symphony that beckoned like a siren. The metallic surface warped, twisting into a warped mirror reflecting the faces of lost souls, me friend's face among them, frozen in terror, as the creature lurked just beyond, its malevolence lingering in the shadows of my mind. A low, rumbling growl reverberated through the air, drawing my attention to the far end of the room. Glancing over, I saw it emerge again, the creature I thought I had escaped, a grotesque abomination poised and leaning against the wall. It didn't have flesh, but rather a swirling vortex of darkness that twisted and twined like a living nightmare. Just then, a door began to open behind me, creaking ominously, and I sensed an invasion of fresh air laced with dread. The whispers seemed to laugh, their excitement thrumming through the very walls, wrapping around me as chains of despair. I hesitated, forced to confront the ultimatum laid before me. Before I could decide, a piercing scream echoed from the newly opened door, a chilling cry for help that sent tremors through my core. The echoes of my friend's voice filled the air, mingled with ghastly echoes and a chorus of disembodied souls. Help! Don't leave me here! The walls dimmed, and the specter loomed closer, its bites of shadow pressing upon me while the door beckoned, simmering with an urgency I knew couldn't last. The shadow shrieked as the figure elongated, reaching for me, and in that moment, I was torn between the agonizing choice: stay and fight the thing that tormented me, or reach through the door to save my friend, maybe seal my doom. My heart raced, the world narrowing down to the door, my friend's pleas tormenting my every thought. I had seconds left to choose: step into the dark, or into the unknown light behind that door. The moment stretched thin, reality twisting as I faced the yawning chasm of darkness behind me and the beckoning light from the door. A sharp pang of guilt seized me, gnawing at my conscience as I recalled the last glimpse of my friend, his terrified eyes locked onto mine, begging for salvation. "Help. Don't leave me here." His voice was a piercing dagger against the thick miasma of dread that surrounded me. "Stay back." The creature hissed, its voice a spiraling melody of malice that twisted through the air like smoke. The shadows danced at its command, a phalanx of fear vibrating with anticipation as it advanced, bringing with it the weight of 1,000 silent screams. I felt its oppressive presence wrap around my throat, a vice grip of pure terror that threatened to choke the will from my body that I forced myself to breathe, the acrid scent of fear swelling in my lungs, drowning my it somewhere beneath that cloud. A spark flickered within. It fluttered like a delicate moth, desperate to evade the suffocating weight of night. "I have to try," I screamed, as if the very proclamation could temporarily exile the darkness that my imagination spiraled back to the glowing doorway, the ghostly wails of my friends summoning pieces of the resolve I thought had shattered. I grasped it tightly, piercing through the thick fog of despair hanging heavily within the secluded place I found myself in, forcing myself to envision the world beyond that door. Before I could think further, I lunged toward the doorway. Adrenaline surged through me, lighting a path through the tendrils of fog that swirled like a vortex around my legs. The shadows hissed in outrage, a cacophony of shrieks pulling at my limbs as if trying to drag me back. The creature slashed close, its mass a tide of horrific absence, hungry and unforgiving. "Let go." I hurled myself forward, arms reaching out, fingers brushing against the cool surface of the doorframe. An unbearable energy pulsed through me, an instinct sharpened to a razor's edge. But the darkness fought back. It coiled around my body, prickling my skin, icy fingers biting into my flesh as I broke through into the light, but the light wasn't what I'd expected. I stumbled into an empty corridor, fluorescent lights flickering violently above, casting grotesque shadows that twisted along the walls like serpents. The air tasted stale, a bitter residue that left a metallic tang on my tongue. "Where are you?" My voice trembled, echoing down the derelict hall as I clutched my sides and tried to shake off the chill clinging to my bones. No response, just silence wrapped in whispers that threatened to drown my resolve. I took a step forward, conscious of the growing disquiet in the world around me. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shuddered, and something in the darkness whispered my name, low and inviting. I felt the urgency of their call ripple through my heart. "Please come back." Before I could react, the hallway distorted, elongating like a ripple in water. Dark figures slithered along the walls, their chattering laughter ringing hollow, an orchestration of nightmares weaving through the fabric of reality. My pulse quickened, the awareness that the shadows were not far behind clawing at my sanity. That I stumbled backward, catching sight of a door at the end of the corridor, a glaring outline against the swirling dimness. Desperation propelled me forward, but before I could reach it, the whispering grew louder, each voice amplified, echoing with the haunting energy of the creature. "Join us." A wave of fear washed over me, paralyzing my limbs, and as if sent from another world, the shadows coalesced, forming humanoid shapes that reached for me with ghastly, contorted fingers. My own reflection, now marred with the stains of despair, flooded my mind. I could see my friend's face among them, merging into the darkness, his features racked with dread. Suddenly, the door creaked open, flooding the corridor with blinding light. It was an overwhelming contrast to the shadows swirling around me, and instinct kicked. I raced toward it, arms stretched wide to grasp whatever sanctuary lay before me. The shadows screamed in unison, their wails hovering just above mind-numbing horror. I broke through the threshold and into an expansive room, my feet hitting a damp, musty floor. The echoes of screams faded into a soft thud, replaced by ear-splitting silence. A single flickering bulb hung above, illuminating a macabre sight strewn across the room. I recoiled in sheer terror. A collection of grim specters, their faces twisted in agony, shackled by chains of shadow, memorializing the lost remnants of my world. And then I recognized one. That my friend's shape was contorted eerily in a corner, eyes wide and pleading. The chains binding him gleamed with the same darkness that had seemed to pulse throughout this infernal realm. "Help me," he gasped, the despair gnawing at my heart like an insatiable predator. Before I could even take a step closer, the walls converged around us, pulsating with relentless energy. The door behind me slammed shut, the sound like a death toll that curdled my blood. As I struggled against the suffocating shadows dancing around the edges, the creature materialized once more, towering over us with a sinister grin. Its voice oozed with malice as it pronounced the inevitable, "You'll never leave, not without him." A sickening crack pierced the air, the chains binding my friend snapping taut like a bowstring, and in that moment I understood a choice had to be made, a sacrifice demanded. But as I looked into my friend's terrified eyes, the truth of the creature's words resonated deep within, a chilling realization. Suddenly, the light flickered ominously before plunging into total darkness, leaving me in a frigid void. The only sound the slow, deliberate echo of a heartbeat. Was it mine, or something else? Then, as the darkness closed in around me, I felt the icy grasp of dread take hold, and the last thing I heard was a whisper weaving through the air, "Choose." The darkness swelled, alive, pulsing around me like a sentient entity searching for a weakness, scrabbling at both my resolve and my breaths. My friend's whimpers echoed in the void, seeming to resonate off the invisible walls, each cry a heavy reminder of the choice looming before me. "Choose," it whispered once more, a haunting invocation laced with premonition. Panicked, I wrestled with the overwhelming weight of despair that threatened to consume me. The icy fingers of chaos clawed at my mind, each thought fracturing as the shadows encroached. What choice was there? To give up my life for his? Could I even discern where his likeness faded into the shadows? Suddenly, the oppressive gloom around me shifted, swirling like mist as a spine-chilling laughter erupted from the creature. "Time is running out," it taunted, its voice an echoing symphony of malice. "The darkness hungers, it will soon claim what it desires." That I clenched my fists, anger igniting a small flame within the vast, consuming void. "You can't take him," I yelled, my voice rising, shaking against my trembling resolve. "I will not let you." In response, the darkness thickened, pulling tighter until I felt the cold draft stealing my breath. My surroundings warped, grappling with reality as the air shimmered, revealing fleeting glimpses of my friend's torment, his form twisted in anguish, mouth agape in a silent scream that sent shards of ice skittering down my spine. "Choose to sacrifice yourself, and it will end for him," the creature cooed, its twisted face hovering mere inches from mine. "But the darkness will always need a hostess." The chilling promise hung in the air. Something shifted deep within me. An idea sparked, a desperate plan woven from the fabric of my terror. With a surge of will, I wrenched my gaze from my friend, casting it toward the edges of the room. There had to be a way to fight against this darkness, inherent and instinctive, unseen forces through the shadows. "Listen to the music of the chains," I screamed, my voice rising against the howling darkness. "You feed on fear, but you'll never have me." In an act of defiance, I shattered the illusion encasing me, bolt after bolt of anger sparking through my veins. The humming, frigid tendrils recoiled, hesitant and momentarily distracted. I caught sight of my friend again, struggling against the chains binding him, a desperate love igniting the horror unfurling within me. With a newfound strength, I raced toward him, every lurch forward a fraught challenge against the pressing darkness. I could hear it writhe and scream, furious and enraged, the malicious laughter morphing into anguished wails as I reached his side. "Don't give up," I urged, gripping his icy fingers, feeling the weight of despair intersecting with our shared resolve. "Together, we can break free." The chains rattled violently around us, their cold metal snapping like angry serpents. The creature's growls echoed in the air, a frenzied cacophony of fury. Yet, in that moment, I felt my friend's warmth echo against my freezing skin, a faint heartbeat mingling with a flicker of hope amidst despair. "Take my hand," I shouted, desperate tears spilling down my cheeks. As our fingers intertwined, a flash of light surged through the darkness around us, illuminating a spectrum of vibrant colors battling the shadows encroaching upon us. The connection between us shone brighter, forcing the shadows to quiver, but the creature was relentless. With a wave of its shadowy arm, the walls shivered, and grotesque forms began to pour from the inky depths, eyes glinting with hollow hunger. They lunged toward us, claws outstretched, shrieking in rage, "Pull, pull!" I screamed into the storm, our grip becoming an anchor against the unfolding chaos. A violent surge of energy whipped through me, coursing like wildfire as we strained against the chains, our unity, a rallying point against the encroaching abyss. And then, a rippling sound broke the air. The chains began to splinter, a chorus of screams morphing into a haunting melody. The very fabric of reality appeared to twist, strands of shadow bending and folding against the glow welling between us. But just as hope seemed to shimmer bright, a soul-chilling roar erupted from the creature. "You think you can escape?" it howled, the shadows surging forth, cloaked in anger and desperation. In that moment, as the world around us contorted and darkened, I felt the grip of the shadow's claw at my back, intent on dragging us both into perdition. My heart thundered, the shocking realization crystallizing in an instant. A flicker of dread tore through me as I stared into my friend's terrified eyes. "No!" I cried, squeezing his hand tighter. But the shadows surged forward with a ghastly finality, tearing our hands apart, as the creature's wrath surged more violently, roaring with hungry triumph. White-hot panic swelled in my chest, and then the world erupted into a blinding flash of shadow and light, as a rift opened above us, dire and hellish, beckoning us to choose sides in a war we never asked to join. As I fell toward the abyss, my scream echoed into the void, swallowed by a consuming darkness that did not care, my friend's voice wavering in the distance. "Please don't leave." Meth Rift clung to each syllable, its shriek melding with despair, and as the light enveloped me, one last gasp escaped my lips, forever caught in the chilling void. What have we done? The world cracked around me. Churning splinters of shadow and light bled into one another, enveloping my consciousness in a chaos that was unsettling yet hauntingly vivid. With my body suspended in that terrifying threshold, I felt the agony of separation clawing at my heart. My friend's anguished cry echoed in the darkness, a shredded plea that echoed far beyond the physical realm, resonating deep in my very core. "Please don't leave me," the rift wailed, distorting his words into a dreadful harmony that anchored itself deep within the very marrow of my being. I reached instinctively, stretching my arms toward the luminous echoes of my friend's presence, plunging into an unforgiving void. But with a wrenching force that rattled my bones, the darkness seized me, pulling me further from him, an insatiable beast gnashing its teeth. As the shadows clawed at me, I felt their cold tendrils coiling around my limbs, ensnaring my spirit. Time felt fragmented, my awareness flickered in waves, sensations ricocheting off a fevered, spiraling path. My surroundings spun wildly. I was torn, suspended between dimensions, caught in an ageless limbo that seethed with malevolence. In that torment, shapes emerged from the swirling chaos, a flicker here, a twitch there, amalgamations of despair molded into familiar figures. I gasped, visions gnashing against each other, manifesting old reminders wrapped in shadows. Faces of lost souls, eyes wide in terror, mouths twisting in silent screams. They surged toward me unbidden, tortured spirits of those who had once stood helpless against the same darkness, revolted yet tethered to a fate worse than death. "Join us," the shadows whispered, voices like rusted chains scraping the ground. "Embrace the night." They reached toward me, clawed fingers scraping against my consciousness, their decrepit forms morphing and convulsing with unseen agony. Each touch sent freezing jolts through my body, memories of regret and despair flooding my mind. I could feel them, people who had once run and lived, their lives devoured by the insatiable darkness I now faced. I howled, fighting against the chill that sought to drown me in oblivion. "I will not become like you." Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath my feet, a sudden shift in the inky mass. Shadows bucked and recoiled as a ghastly figure emerged, a grotesque embodiment of despair. The creature loomed larger than before, its twisted visage stretching into a mocking grin, eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "Foolish one," it hissed, the breath of its words curling black tendrils around my heart. "You cannot resist. Join them or suffer for eternity." With a howl of pure rage, I tore through the shadows wrapping around me, a surge of raw, primal energy erupting within. I had felt my friend's presence flicker somewhere on the cusp of reality, his light pulsing against the darkness like a beacon, torn yet unwavering. "Together!" I shouted into the dark, the word a lifeline anchoring my spirit. "We can break free," the shadows screamed, writhing as though repelling my defiance. For a heartbeat, I felt the connection flare. His struggle was no longer merely a fading memory, but a shared heartbeat thrumming in tandem with mine. As I focused deeper, the chaotic winds around me dwindled, whispering secrets of the damned, yet my resolution held firm. With each mantra I uttered, "Together, together, together," the shadows buckled, revealing fissures through which flickers of hope broke through the dark. The creature shrieked in agony, its shriek a cacophony that tore the air apart. But just when clarity began to emerge, the rift behind me groaned, shifting ominously. The horrors lurking at its edges buzzed with a new intensity, their hollow eyes glistening with fresh ferocity. They surged forth, a horde of vengeful spirits attacking my tenuous grasp on reality. Imagine 1,000 desperate hands clawing for recognition. No. I shrieked, throwing out my arms, each gesture a feeble attempt to ward off this next onslaught. The shadows scuttled like insects, engulfing me, until I could scarcely breathe. The pull of the rift became more pronounced, a siren's call coaxing all that was good from me, dragging me down into unspeakable terror. In the moment before everything shattered, I glimpsed the creature's face twisted in fervent satisfaction, a herald of horror relishing its prey. Such joy I will take in your suffering. It cackled, as the world tilted and folded around me, plunging me back toward the heart of that suffocating abyss, and then it stopped. An echo rang out through the darkness, a voice pierced through the dread like a lighthouse in a raging storm. Look for the light. It beckoned, wrapped in familiar warmth. My friend's spirit reached desperately toward me, a glimmer igniting in the oppressive blackness, but just before I took that leap of faith, ready to embrace that fleeting glimmer of hope, the shadows struck back with all their rage and despair, a tidal wave of madness crashing against me. I felt myself shatter into a million pieces, spiraling, and then, silence. The darkness closed in for what felt like an eternity. A single question echoed in the void. What will you sacrifice? In that moment, as a flicker of light dared to emerge alongside utter annihilation, I realized with burgeoning dread that the true choice was yet to come, a choice that could shatter us both, or worse, leave one to face the chaos alone. The darkness around me unraveled, and I awoke not in the comforting arms of light but within a cavernous chamber, soaked in shadows that pulsed and writhed like a living entity. My breath came in shallow, trembling gasps, and I pressed my back against the cold, damp stone wall behind me. The air was thick with dread, suffocating. I strained my ears to listen, heart pounding like a war drum in the hushed malevolence. From beyond the murky depth ahead, whispered echoes twisted in a sinister symphony. They were the remnants of other lost souls, their wails rising and falling like waves crashing against jagged cliffs. Eyes wide, I charged forward, each step a desperate attempt to escape that hollow abyss, yet the shadows throbbed with a conspiratorial hunger, coaxing forth memories of pain and remorse. Look for the light. I had heard my friend's voice clear as day, but where was that warmth now? Was it merely a dying ember lost amidst the shadows? In my frantic rush, I nearly stumbled over a grotesque shape on the ground, a body slumped against the wall, twisted in its torment. I recoiled, instinctively bringing my hands up to shield my face against the remnants of a soul that mirrored the agony within. The figure was drenched in shadow, eyes sunken, stained with despair, a reflection of the darkness that threatened to dominate me. I didn't want to find out who it was, not yet. The distinction between friend and enemy was blurring in this accursed chamber. Leave, a hoarse whisper clawed at my ears. Leave while a shiver cascaded down my spine. Panic kicked in, urging the primal instinct to run. But as I turned to flee, a shriek reverberated through the cavern, reverberating against the walls and rattling my very essence. I spun around, just in time to witness a figure emerging from the shadows, a creature veiled in the essence of despair, its form writhing and elongating with grotesque fluidity. What are you? I gasped, attempting to back away, but the entire floor felt like it might give way beneath me. Your greatest fear, the being hissed, its voice an echoing chorus imitating 1,000 voices. Your past, present, and future ignited into one. I am what devours hope. Without warning, the creature lunged, blackened claws stretched forward, and instinct took over. I dashed left, narrowly avoiding capture, but the creature was undeterred. It spun and followed, morphing through the shadows with an unearthly speed. As I raced ahead, the chamber began to twist and distort, the walls pulsating like the chest of a dying beast, breathless, almost alive. Suddenly, the ground beneath me fractured, opening wide to reveal an abyss that threatened to pull me down. A piercing scream echoed from the void, an unbearable mixture of despair and fury. Save me! Someone cried, but the voice contorted into a shrill laugh, twisting into a cacophony of despair that seized my heart. I hesitated, torn between the ominous darkness swallowing the chamber and the ethereal sounds of my friend's screams echoing within the snare above. I lurched toward the edge, desperately battling an overwhelming compulsion to hurl myself into the void to silence that torment, but as I reached out, I felt the presence of the creature, an ugly silhouette against the backdrop of despair. It's your choice, it snarled, its eyes blazing with hunger. Join them or become one of us. That I staggered backward, fear wrapping around me like a vice. But then, something surged within me, a flicker of resilience ignited against the tide of horror. I couldn't abandon him, not when it felt as if the very roots of our connection pulsed through this hell. Together, I shouted, uncertainty and fervor mixing in my voice. I will find you, and we will fight, the creature shrieked, contorting as though my defiance struck at its very core. But beneath its fury, I noticed flickers of doubt, a crack in the armor of that darkness. It recoiled slightly, and I seized the moment, navigating the treacherous ground as I fought against my own terror. But what was that? A pulse of fear squeezed my heart as I glanced back toward the abyss. The mouths within, those ghastly visages, were no longer just cries for help, they were beckoning. I could feel the weight of countless souls behind me. They reached out with gnarled fingers, frantically crying out, "Take the step, join us." I felt the shadows tightening around me again, closer this time, brushing against my skin, each breath a reminder of the relentless grip of dread. The combatants of fear and hope clashed violently within me, threatening to drown me in their chaos. And then, just as I began to slip back into hopelessness, a ghostly light caught my eye, shimmering amid the murky malignance. Now. It beckoned. "It's your last chance." But before I could make a decision, the shadow creature lunged forward with a guttural roar, fangs bared. The chamber quaked with a violent force as everything around me imploded, fractured in an explosion of terror, and then, I heard a different voice, echoing above the Dino whisper that felt like cold steel pressed to my throat. "There is only one way out. Choose wisely." In that lingering moment, suspended between hope and terror, I felt the very essence of the darkness shift at my back, as the abyss reached out with greedy fingers, ensnaring my thoughts in its inescapable grasp. I was flung into a surreal void, and as I closed my eyes tight, reality fractured into slivers of nightmarish sensations. The cacophony of shrieks, whispers, and laughter blurred around me until I could no longer tell who I was or where I belonged. When I finally forced my eyelids open, the world had transformed, and I stood amidst a nightmarish maelstrom of shifting shadows and flickering phantoms. The chamber was no longer confined within damp stone walls. It had stretched infinitely, twisting into a labyrinthine expanse where the very foundations felt treacherous, shifting beneath my feet. Above me, a ceiling of undulating black threatened to collapse, as if the darkness itself wished to smother me. Shapes flickered at the periphery, fleeting hints of faces frozen in eternal agony, each shadow writhing in the grotesque dance of a haunted nightmare. That I stumbled forward, each step dragging me deeper into the depths of my own despair. "Find the light," that voice echoed again in my mind like a taunt, but I could see no light here, only the swallowing dark. As I moved, tendrils of cold air wrapped around my ankles, snaking up towards my chest, quickening my pulse to a frantic rhythm. I shadowed that ethereal glow I'd glimpsed before, my hope tethered to it, but each stride felt like running through thick mud, every breath caught in my throat. Then it came again, that awful scream, but this time it was different, closer, more desperate, more familiar. My heart plummeted as I recognized the voice. It was my friend, its dread-filled cry fractured by an echoing emptiness that pierced through the air. "Help me. Please, Ben." I shouted, but my voice met silence, swallowed whole by the shadows. Panic clawed at my instincts, and without thought, I charged toward the pulsating glow. Propelled by that urgent call, the space warped around me, shapes shifting in my vision, dark figures materializing, resizing, evaporating, some agonized, others transfixed in sinister grins. I could feel their eyes boring into me, piercing past the veil of flesh, feeding on my fear like a ravenous predator. Suddenly, a figure leapt from the shadows, its form partially obscured, gliding with a dissonant grace. It had the same sunken eyes, the same anguish etched across its face. It was Ben. "Don't come closer," he cried, voice stretching thin as if tethered to some unseen force. "You'll be trapped like me." My heart raced. I reached out. "No. I won't leave you." I fought against a compulsion pulling me away, breaking through the grasp of the shadows that curled around me, sharing with Ben my desperate yearning. "They'll take you," he shrieked, but the shadows had already begun to constrict him, whispering promises of eternal torment into the depths of his soul. As I edged closer, I could see the shadows gripping his legs, pulling him deeper into a chasm, their whispers turning into shrill laughter. "Join us, little lost one," they taunted, the surroundings shifting chaotically. You cannot escape. Watch him become one with us. Fight it, Ben. Fight them. I screamed, feeling the abyss tugging at my own will, an intoxicating blend of despair and desperation. The darkness writhed like living smoke, sneering at my defiance. Then, suddenly, the warmth of the ghostly light pulsed like a heartbeat, beckoning me closer. I could faintly see clarity in its radiance, as if it offered a chance at salvation, a glimmer of the life I once had. Take my hand, please. Ben implored, but his voice was tearing apart, devoured by shadows now flooding his mouth, dragging him down into the gnashing of malevolence. Hold on. I'm coming. I lunged toward him, every fiber of my being fighting against the shadows that threatened to consume me. I reached out, fingers trembling as the dark gasps turned to furious howls, the shadows stretching wildly trying to deter me. Just as I was about to clasp his hand, his face twisted in agony, and he transformed, eyes wide with horror. No longer my friend but an abomination born of despair. His scream twisted into a laugh, mocking yet desperate. Join us. Frozen in terror, I yanked my hand back, heart hammering against my ribcage. In that instant, a realization dawned. This was no escape, this was a sacrifice, and I was merely a pawn in this darkness. With a roar, the chamber erupted, shadows swirling violently, consuming everything in their path. The light flickered, sputtering against the resurgence of darkness that surged at my back, mounting ferocity that was deafening. That a beam of light shot through the chaos, piercing the suffocating gloom, but standing beneath it filled me with unimaginable dread. I couldn't remain still as the shadows clawed, filling the air with their oppressive weight. That heartbeat of resolution. I looked at Ben's mangled face, twisted in that haunting laughter, and I leaped toward the light, feeling its radiant heat. But before I could touch it, the creature hurled itself from the shadows, a terrifying visage of pure hatred and despair, an embodiment of every nightmare converging upon me. Foolish one. It hissed, its mouth curling into a gruesome smile. You'll never leave this place. As I felt the shadows constricting around me, the world spun into chaos, and the last remnants of hope evaporated. The light flickered, then dimmed, as cold hands grasped my ankles, dragging me backward into the ravenous maw of darkness, each scream echoing my own. With my breath hitching in my throat, I realized the truth. Even if I stepped into the light, part of me might be left behind, a mere echo in this relentless void. And then silence engulfed me, heavy and suffocating. The last thing I heard before my world plummeted into complete darkness was a chorus of lost souls whispering in terrifying unison, "You belong with us." The darkness cradled me, a maternal embrace laced with a chilling promise: isolation. I drifted through the void, senses dulled, but the whispering continued, an unrelenting stream of despair pouring into my mind. "You belong to us. You are ours," they sang, their voices a hypnotic lullaby against my fraying sanity. It felt surreal, as if I were watching myself float through a nightmarish landscape, where memories melded with shadows, painting the echoes of my existence gray. But then, from the depths of despair, something shifted. A flicker of awareness stirred within me, igniting a spark that trembled against the overwhelming weight of resignation. I could still hear Ben's voice, warped and pleading a broken plea slipping through the black currents that sought to consume my will. "Help me, don't leave me." With a surge of renewed vigor, I clung tightly to that voice, anchoring my spirit as I pulled myself forward against the tide of shadows. Each breath felt like a fragile flame flickering against the suffocating fog that enveloped me. "Ben!" I shouted, fabricating light with every frantic syllable. "I'm here," and then I could see him sort of. His form flickered like a glitch in reality, surrounded by shadowy tendrils that clung to him, their whispers curling around his essence. His eyes bore into mine, pools of anguish reflecting a torment I could feel yet could not comprehend entirely. "It's too late," he cried, yet the fragility of his words rang hollow. "Get out while you can." "No," I shouted defiantly into the spiraling dark. "We can escape together." I pushed through the shadows, stretching out my hand, desperate to bridge the gap separating us, but the darkness retaliated, swirling like a tempest, and I felt it pull at my very core. "You will join us," a voice echoed, deep and terrible, reverberating through my bones. "Say goodbye to the light. Embrace what you truly are." Ben gripped his head, anguish contorting his features as the shadows cascaded around him. The image of my friend warped, twisting until he wasn't just a shadow anymore, but a grotesque reflection of every fear I carried, a taint of darkness born from the depths of despair. "You can't save me. It's over," he cried, his voice morphing into 1,000 ghostly echoes, unraveling my determination. That a sudden rush of sorrow pierced through me like a dagger. It struck me deep and cruel, the inescapable truth I had tried to evade. He was right. The shadows feasted on my fear, each doubt pulling me further back into the grip of despair. I realized then that I was not just a victim, I was tethered to these shadows in a way I couldn't fully comprehend, a dark bond forged on guilt and dread. That as his form flickered, I could no longer discern where his despair ended, and mine began. "You must leave. Don't turn back." His eyes screamed with urgency, a stark reminder that I was his last tether to hope, even in this twisted reality. "You have to find the key," the words pierced through the noise, and in a moment of clarity, I felt a flicker of possibility sparking within the catacombs of darkness. "The key," I repeated, resolving to sift through the cacophony, and as the shadows bore down on me, I stumbled through the malevolent void, searching for a semblance of light. Suddenly, shadows erupted, swirling violently before coalescing into a grotesque figure that twisted and shifted, every anguished scream echoing around me, wrapping tighter and tighter. "You are lost," it roared, thick tendrils reaching toward me, beckoning me to submit. "You will never find the key. There is only darkness here." Pinpricks of light ignited inside of me, illuminating the memory of laughter, of days spent lingering in sun-drenched parks, of life untainted by shadow. "Fight!" I shouted against the overwhelming gloom, memories colliding with the chilling reality. "I won't become just another whisper." In that shimmer of defiance, something shifted, an iridescent glow pulsing in the void. I gasped and spun, grasping for it. "Ben!" I cried once more, tears cascading down my cheeks. "I can still get us out. I know I can find the key." I felt the pull of the shadows intensifying, a clamorous wail chilling my bones. "Foolish child. You cannot run from the truth. You belong to us." "No." I propelled myself forward, fueled by grief and love, resonating from the core where the heart once beat in unison with hope. "You have no power over me." The light quivered, illuminating a path where shadows writhed behind me, their influence thinning against my fervent resistance, and then I saw its flickering key, standing at the threshold of the abyss, ethereal and pulsating like the heartbeat of life. Instantaneously, I lunged forward and grasped it, warmth spiraling through my fingers, a surge of energy, unraveling the very fabric of the darkness that sought to contain me. "Help me, please." Ben echoed in the elegant chaos, but the shadows reformed around him, distorting his face as horror danced at the fringes of my vision. "I'm coming," I shouted, clenching the key tightly. The darkness bubbled and hissed in fury, recoiling from the vibrant light radiating from my grasp as I thrust it toward the depths of despair. We break the cycle together. In an eruption of brilliant illumination, the key unlocked a door hidden amidst the shadows, casting away the darkness and revealing a blinding path. My heart raced, each beat synchronized with the surge of hope pulsing alive within me. I refused to lose another moment. I dashed toward my friend and flung the door wide. The shadows writhed and screamed, desperate and angry, as I dashed back into the suffocating darkness, grasping Ben's hands in a fierce embrace, his form flickering between realms. "We can break free," I cried, feeling the light between us swell like a heart beating for the first time, and together, we plunged into the doorway of radiance. But then, a ripple of time slowed, visions morphed around us, and the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening finality, sealing the shadows away and enveloping us in blinding light. Uncertainty shackled me. As everything faded into a haze, a chilling realization set in. I turned to Ben, who stood beside me, but his eyes were vacant eyes that offered nothing but a haunting echo of fear intermingled with unfathomable dread. A memory flickered in the ether, a moment lost in a sea of despair. The weight of their wails sank into my mind, and suddenly the truth trickled in. I didn't know where we had gone, if we had truly escaped or simply veiled ourselves in a nightmare anew. The shadows still lingered, waiting patiently outside that door, but the grip of its darkness tightened around us again, and then, in an instant, I understood there was never a way out. We were destined to run forever, the shadows always at our heels, the whispers lingering at the edges of our consciousness. As we stood rooted in that flickering light, the last echoes of despair filled the air, mocking our feeble escape. And as the room around me steadily faded, only one thought remained, one stark, horrifying conclusion that would haunt my every breath: we were the shadows all along. And somewhere in the darkness, a distant voice laughed, its echo ringing with dreadful familiarity: "You cannot escape what you've become."